Right, yeah, hello, I'm Ivan. This is Observability for Developers. Firstly, a quick bit of housework. That's not my face, that's my cat, Stephen. Lots of the slides, slide templates have a spot for the speaker's face. I always find that a bit weird because you can see my face. And judging by the size of the screen today, I do not regret that decision. Yeah. So, observability for developers. It's a subject that's very close to my heart. I've spent 15, 16 years doing monitoring observability in some pretty large financial organizations. And yeah, I really enjoyed Sonia's talk today from Tyke, and she said that monitoring isn't just for production. That was one of the anti-patterns, and I couldn't agree with that more. But it's actually quite a kind of hard sell in my experience for getting monitoring going, helping developers with this. It's not something that I've found historically very easy. There are some things that work, but yeah, it's not that easy. But first, let's go through this. So, something I'd like everyone to understand is that we all work with mental models, right? This is how we understand that everything is going on in our system. And our mental model is built up based on the information that we have available to us around our system, right? And we all build up our own mental models based on our experience and our interactions with the system. And as we learn something new about our system, we apply this to our mental model. And then if we want to maybe try and understand what's going on in our code base, we've got a bug or an incident, or even we want to implement a new feature, we use our mental models to help us and understand what's going on and where we should, the best way to implement that new feature, or where maybe in the code base we want to look at for our particular bug or problem or whatever. And this is why. So Dr. Richard Cook released this amazing paper called Above the Line, Below the Line. And by the way, I am so pleased with myself that I used the slide thing and put above the line, and below the line, below the line. Very simple things for simple people, but I was really pleased with myself there. Anyway, above the line is us, right? And it's really important to remember that we are all part of the system, right? Humans and technology, they are complex social, technical systems, however you say that word. But we are part of the system, but we are above the line, right? And there is this line of representation, which is how we kind of understand what's going on in the other part of the system, which is below the line. And that is the code, the infrastructure, the other tech stuff, right? We don't actually see noughts and ones going through processes or anything else like that. We only get to observe them via our line of representation. And as a result, observability is a really big part of this, right? This helps us understand what's going on. It improves the quality of our line of representation. So, as I said, we build our mental models based on what we know, what's available to us, the interactions that we have with the system. So, for developers, people writing code, that is the actual code itself, right? It's the code base. The mental model is built up around the functions, the modules, and everything else like that. And as I said, everyone's mental model is different, but it's based on our interactions, developers, code. And you know, there's always been quite a big split in mental models, really. I'm from an ops background. I said monitoring observability, big production systems, reliability, la la la. But that would be a very different mental model to some people from the dev world. And that's always kind of historically been okay, because obviously, historically we had pets. I'm sure everyone has heard of this analogy before. I've got the words DevOps in a later slide, so I think I actually have to say this analogy by law. So you can see Stephen looking very regal. I think this is his kind of Sphinx pose, looking pretty unimpressed that I'm taking his photo. And to follow this through, right, each server is a pet that has a sysadmin looking after it, and that's me in this case, right? And I know that when I get a notification at 6 a.m. from my feline pager, that means that it's time to feed the cat, because I understand the system, right? I understand everything that's going on with it. And that used to work, and that was lovely, and we had a really great understanding of these pets. But that's changed, right? We don't have pets, we have cattle. And that's changing the way that we are developing applications and services and everything. And so we've built new ways of creating our applications and services. And we have DevOps, and that's really, really great, and something that I've been really, really interested in from an ops point of view. But going to DevOps meetups and things quite early on, it kind of felt a lot like DevOps, right? There was a big emphasis on devs, and this is a point of view that I heard quite a few times, right? DevOps is just getting devs to do ops job. And well, that's obviously not true, and I hope we're all aware of that. But there were some reasons why people began to think that this was the case, and we talk about this left shift, right? Often accompanied by the words digital transformation and other such kind of buzzwords. But the point was that we were trying to get people to do things earlier in the software development lifecycle, and that would be great. And why do that, you may ask? Well, as I'm sure the technical-minded amongst you have noticed, this is a graph. And what it shows is that if you take the corner there, that's when we write the code. We've got time along the bottom. Everything becomes more difficult over time, right? Finding and fixing bugs, looking at performance issues, changing how a feature works. Everything gets harder over time. So if we can do stuff earlier, it's easier, it's cheaper, it's quicker to do, right? So why not do that? And it's worth pointing out that this is not like an exhaustive list of everything that gets harder over time. Personally, I find standing up is getting more difficult over time. Saying sorry is more difficult over time. So not an exhaustive list, but yeah, we're in a tech conference, so let's think about developing software. And so we want to do stuff earlier in the life cycle, right? Great, we understand that. But the fact is that the way that the situation we're in at the moment is that we've got developers with their mental models based on their code and everything, but the metrics that we're producing for these systems doesn't really relate to what's going on, right? And it's very difficult to translate what's going on with our mental model into the data that we get from our monitoring services. And that's an obstacle, right? It's a big blocker, and as a result, it often just doesn't happen. And to be quite honest, yeah, I said I'm a monitoring observability person. I've done this for a long time, but even I'm capable of forgetting that there's actually a huge amount of domain-specific knowledge that is required to actually get actionable, meaningful information from most monitoring tools, right? It's really, really costly to translate, to learn how to translate your mental model into the data, depending on the tool. Writing from QL is really hard. Actually knowing that the data that it's returned from your query is the actual data that you want it to be is probably even harder. And so what happens quite often is that if people are given a task, they learn enough to do that task, and then they forget about it. Right? We never commit this stuff to permanent memory. If someone is given a task to instrument code, they'll go and look at the documentation, learn how to instrument the code, instrument it, move on. Right? Forget about it, on to the next one, hope someone else gets asked to do that task next time. And so the effort required is higher than the perceived value. Right? The effort to learn that tool, learn all the data, understand it, translate it to your mental model, it's really, really high. And it just doesn't seem worth it. And something I've also noticed is that the people in the kind of development world who can do that, who do understand the data, who've taken the time to work with their mental models and the data, they often get pulled into all of the incidents. And that is not a motivator for anyone else to do it, right? Because no one wants to be involved in incidents. So what can we do? So myself and some colleagues and some various other people from around the world have been looking at this, and we've got an open source micro framework, we're calling it actually, called Autometrics. And it's aimed to build developer-first metrics, right? And it's based on a lot of great open source technologies, such as Prometheus and OpenTelemetry, which you've already heard a lot about. It's great. How does it work? Well, you can see you import some libraries there, Autometric stuff. We've got the Prometheus client, because in this case, we're using the Prometheus client to generate the metrics. And we've defined an SLO, nice and simply. Use SLOs, they're great. And then you can see that we've just simply decorated our function. My company is based in Amsterdam. We're a Dutch company, so our little demo app is a little API that pretends to deliver tulips to your door, which is why it's called All Tulips, but that's the name of my function. And I've decorated that function, and I've applied an SLO to it to say, I want to include this function in my SLO calculations. What do you get? You get 3 metrics for every function that you have decorated. You get the rate, so the amount of times that function was invoked, the errors, and the duration. So that's a Prometheus histogram for how long an invocation is taking. And from there, we work out the P95 and P99 things and all that good stuff. So let's go back to this, right? We build our mental models based on what we know. So that's code for a lot of people who write code. This is a bit dark on the screen, I guess, but hopefully you can see. This is what it actually looks like when you load up the nice little user interface. Now, this is a couple of weeks old, I think, so there's a couple of new bits coming out. But the point is that it's actually organized by function and by module and stuff that actually makes sense to the people who wrote the code. And that's quite important. There is no special domain knowledge required. There is no writing PromQL to understand what's going on in your function. And so it looks an awful lot more, it's much easier to translate the data here into the mental model that you are creating when you actually wrote the code. There's even like a little bit down there, functions called by this function. So it's kind of like a little bit like tracing, all done through metrics, which is pretty cool as well from my point of view. And so there you go. That is Autometrics. And hopefully what that will do, so this is my first journey into doing AI-generated art, and I'm not convinced, to be honest. But anyway, I typed in coders with superpowers, and this is what I got back. So yeah, not convinced, but anyway. The point is, right, that by minimizing the gap between the mental models that we create when we're writing the software to the actual data that we produce when we're running the software, be it locally or in production, we are actually making it easier for people to take actions, to not just like understand that there is data, but to take meaningful insights from that data that they can action on, right? We can help everyone understand where errors are occurring quickly. We can help everyone understand and pinpoint performance issues quickly, earlier in the software development lifecycle, which, as we all know, as said, is cheaper, easier, and just generally more fun. So we can actually go back to letting people spend time on what they want to be doing, which is writing code. Right, so that is it. Thank you very much. Here's my liberty for you.
Thanks a lot, Ivan. Ivan, sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Ivan. Great talk. We have a few minutes time for questions again. Any questions? Perfect.
So Autometrics, you send the Prometheus and OpenTelemetry, so it means that it's producing OpenTelemetry metrics. Then I can use a collector, and I don't need necessarily to use Prometheus. I can use any data storage to do that.
Yep.
You mentioned the UI. So the UI is just a way that you're providing is just out-of-the-box visualizations.
Yep.
But if we want, we can just use Autometrics and display on whatever solution we have in place.
Yep. So I have run the collector and sent it to a variety of different monitoring tools, including Dynatrace. I think actually I did try. Basically, everyone that would give me a free trial, I've pretty much tried and sent it to. And yeah, it works, right? As you say, it is just a Prometheus metric that is generated. So scrape it, collector, blah blah blah. There is you can choose whether you want to use the Prometheus clients or the OpenTelemetry client to actually generate the metric, and there is some work to move to an OTLP push as well that's ongoing as well for various kind of serverless use cases and things like that. But yes, it will work. It's not tied to the interface. That is just a simple container that you can run in Docker that is specifically aiming to help kind of developers with their local experience.
And the second question I have is that you define an objective here, like a P99 in the example you showed us. Are you have thought about generating a log, like an event, that we can pick up and say, oh, the Automatrix SLO has been failing, so I'm sending an event to let us know that something is...
Yeah. So let me see if I... there you go. So this one, if you might not be able to see, but at the top you've got SLOs and alerts. There are other tabs there. So the SLOs then, on that screen you can actually start to see the SLOs, how they're doing, because you can link this thing up to a Prometheus instance running anywhere. So if you do have Prometheus in production, need to work on, I guess, integrations with other tools on that front for production. But yeah, there are those, and then there are alerts as well based on, kind of SLO-based alerting and straight from the Google SRE book, right? So yeah, I think the notifications bit, I think the person that's working on that is looking at kind of Slack notifications and things first. But yeah, that is exactly the point.
So the evaluation of the SLO is mainly done on the observability layer.
The creation of the SLO is done within the code base. Then it depends on how you want to do it. So under the hood, they're using another open source tool, Sloth, to create the actual recording rules and everything else like that you can upload into Prometheus. Again, they are just straight from the Google SRE book, so you can do them in any tool you want. It's just that, as I said, this is a kind of open source first thing aimed at kind of Prometheus users and stuff like that. So.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, perfectly. I guess everybody's looking forward to lunch now already. So this brings us directly to a lunch break. Again, thanks a lot, Ivan, for this great presentation. I learned a lot, so it was really insightful. And I think there's a lot of observability and monitoring obviously going on this conference here. And after the, well, it's an important topic, right? And I think the anti-pattern which you just mentioned in the beginning, that monitoring is not something, or observability is not something that only should happen in production, right? But should be treated as a first-class citizen in our community. I think this brings us very well to the next talk we have after lunch break on this stage, which is I think observability or monitoring as a code, where Jose Javier talks about how we can basically treat our monitoring stack, our monitoring assets in a way as we treat everything else. I would say in our community. So looking forward to this one, and yeah, have a great lunch. Don't forget, as I mentioned, to visit also the sponsor booths. They did a lot of cool things to basically show them what they're doing, to show you their products, to show you their expertise and things like that. And as I said before, also don't forget, if you want to join the after party, to register, right? So we have limited spaces. I think there's still 15 spaces left or something like this. If you want to register and if you want to have your space there, go to this QR code at the backside of your badge, and then you find all the relevant information. So thanks a lot. Enjoy your meal, and see you then in the afternoon.